Great. Good evening, everybody. It's February 16th, 2022. Hopefully they had a good Valentine's, hopefully. They either won or shared their hearts out to somebody, hopefully, and got some reciprocation, hopefully. Welcome to the City Council's Charter Review Commission. It's Wednesday, and we're going to call this meeting to order. And roll call, please.
Chairman Igliozzi.
Present.
Chairman Vargas.
Present.
Councilwoman Castillo.
Present.
Commissioner Principe.
Present.
Commissioner Pandy. Is absent. Commissioner McCleary. Is absent. Commissioner Ochoa.
Present.
Commissioner Ritchie.
Present.
Commissioner Montague.
Present.
We have 7 present and 2 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you all. Thank you all for attending again, commissioners. I appreciate the energy and effort you put into this matter. I think we have the first item, Madam Clerk's item number 1, and I think it's going to be Article 3, I guess, entitled the Mayor, right? So do we have someone from the Mayor's office this evening to talk about any proposed changes?
The name they gave me is not here, and they didn't get back to me.
So we did invite the Mayor's office, and of course, we will continue to invite the Mayor's office if they think there's any particular changes or things they think they may like to revisit or visit, well, not just this portion of the charter, but any piece. So make sure, Madam Clerks, that, we always welcome any, input. Committee members, did you want to just go, do you want to talk about that section this time? Commissioner, have anything you mention?
Well, I'd like to hear from the mayor's office if we could maybe they show up later in the evening.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next, all right?
On the agenda.
Perfect, okay. So next we have, actually we have the City Council Article 4. And who, also at the record reflect, I just saw that Councilwoman Ryan is present and Councilman, President Pro Tem Espinal. Sorry.
And Commissioner Patton is joining.
Oh, Commissioner Patty is there. Thank you. She's here also. Great. So did we have any comments on that particular issue at this time?
I don't believe I have received any comments from council members at this time on that section. Without any of the council members present.
So I have a couple of things.
Right.
If we go to section 401 legislative powers, subsection D. Over my limited experience in the city council in my journey, there have been numerous times when the city council had to have the ability to defend itself, to or get additional information for access to experts and information. And as a legislative branch, we'd be at a disadvantage if we were either at odds with the executive branch or some other agency where we would have to scramble to try to get some professional help. And one of the issues is in the present charter, it says the council has to get 2/3 of the vote to hire a consultant, legal counsel, accountants, engineers, experts, not regularly employed. And it would seem that because that bar, and I've seen it, the bar is so high, that what ends up happening is executive branches are able to convince enough council members to say no, and then council members are at a disadvantage. By the way, for example, when we council want to exercise the rights under the city charter, and when we couldn't get the city solicitor's office to do it, right? And we were trying to defend the city charter and the rule of it, and there was no way to go down that road because the city solicitor wouldn't do it at the time. And then there was enough council members who were in favor of the mayor's, the mayor had favoritism, that the council and the charter would be at a disadvantage. It's perfect, as an example. So this is something that I think we should definitely revisit. I think it should be a simple majority, because when it comes to issues like that, it's important that if an executive branch wants to abuse the charter, and then the city solicitor's office is unwilling to defend the charter, the city council has an obligation to step up and do something. And there's been examples, and I just give you an example. Way back when we had a contract And by law, actually by actually precedent, case precedent, and by charter, all these types of contracts have to be approved by the council. But because the council couldn't get 2/3 vote, right? The violation of charter continued with this contract of being an illegal contract that stayed in place for almost, good 8 years.
What contract?
It was a contract for the chief of police,
Right.
in which that administration did several things. One, they had a contract in which they paid the chief of police's down payment on a new house. They paid for the chief of police's moving expenses.
So I think that.
They also paid for not only just the city pension, but then also added an additional, like what do you call it, tax deferred 401k package for the individual. And they paid for additional benefits that are not within the confines of the normal course. So it was beyond the scope of a contract, and that contract had to be vetted and should have been submitted by the council, and the council had a right to vote up or down on it.
So they went outside, Mr. Chairman, if I may, they went outside of the ordinance for the salary. And they.
Oh, yeah, they went beyond
Right, obviously,
appropriations.
they went way beyond.
They went
that,
beyond
but
the
this-
order.
This contract didn't go to the board of contract, refresh my memory.
What happened is that, the appropriations is set, actually, the city council passes the budget, and we set appropriation comp classification.
Right.
And that comp classification for chief of police's acts, right? So then what ended up happening is they said, we're gonna ignore the city law, which is the ordinances, and we're gonna enter into a separate contract with this person, the chief of police, which was well beyond what the ordinances called for, which, by the way, by law, that's how you get paid, and well beyond any compensation package. And at that time, the solicitor's office was unwilling to support the council and say, you need to enforce at least the city ordinances. So they wouldn't enforce the city laws or the charter. And then the council wasn't able to address this
They
travesty.
The salary review cap as well.
Everything. Well,
Right.
actually, chief of police doesn't go so review.
Oh, yes.
No, I'm sorry, there you go. So, yeah, went beyond that. So
Well,
that was an
didn't go to
example.
the- I'm getting at.
They
They didn't go to the board of
The
contract.
council applies, then it go, and by the way, it should, because the city council sets comp classification, that's the budget. So that was a
So
perfect,
what is 2/3? What's
2/3,
that number?
that becomes
Like 10.
10. So with a simple majority, at least when these types of events happen, and they do happen, my point is people say, oh, it doesn't happen. But I've seen in my experience numerous times when these types of extraordinary events occur. And because of bad politics, creates bad policy.
The only thing I'd be concerned about, even like if the council had its own legal counsel, you're constantly fighting, between the branches of government. Can there be a limit put on how long these contracts, these ancillary contracts can run?
Oh, I don't think that's a problem. I think he needs to have to define it, but the problem is that the council is a co-equal branch of government. And it always, throughout the years, becomes a disadvantage when the executive branch goes beyond their powers and duties and rights. And then when you have a city solicitor's office who's willing to call them on it, then the council as a body doesn't have any ability to do that. So that's why the 2/3, as you know, I remember when this was written, it was very mayoral centric type of charter. And my concern, of course, is that there's no balance. There's not a
It's a strong
balance.
executive power.
Right, but there needs to be checks and balances.
And you did, even with the 2/3, they are duly elected individual council people, and for whatever reason, they didn't want to go, along with
Oh, no, I agree with you, but
that issue.
Well, let's say you only need 8 council members to pass a budget. You only need 8 council members to pass 500, $100 million worth of loans and stuff. And you only need 8 council members to raise taxes or to lower taxes. So all the extremely important issues, it's only 8. But when it comes to the council wanting to defend a position, whether it's against defend the charter or the ordinance of the law, we have to get a supermajority. It doesn't make sense.
The right way to handle that contract was to put it before either the council or the board of contract.
Exactly.
Because there are times when you may need a special package to attract highly qualified.
So that's kind of one of the things.
And just to point out, in terms of, in the case of a solicitor being hired by, or an attorney being hired by the council, in the city solicitor section of the charter, it does note that any legal counsel hired or appointed by the city council would be overseen by the city solicitor. Because you
Correct.
can't have somebody coming on board that's going to be not working in the city's best interest. So it's not, it would be.
Right. We don't want to do them what.
Exactly.
And they-
Well, no, the lawyer would fall, but the bottom line is, it forces the issue that there would be a lawyer representing the council interest. So I think there's a lawyer right now representing the mayor's interest, whoever the mayor is. Now, I guess the question comes down to, it's about representing democracy. So this is something I would like to visit. So there's one of the things.
So as we visit that, as we're doing our tour of the communities too, we get feedback from the communities also, correct? Okay.
And another one is section 402, powers of investigations. I think when we talk about the idea when the council starts investigating, the council starts, looking for witnesses to testify, one of the kinds of things that will happen is that we have department heads refusing to testify before council, the council body or the council committees, in which they call that they're running a budget and they're told not to come forward. That's always been a kind of concern because it seems that the council has to take extraordinary act to get information from, not just for folks, let me know, we are the overseers, we're the checks and balances, right? And so administrations in the past have said, we're not gonna send out department heads there, we're not gonna testify, we're not gonna give you any information. And then it becomes, I'll be honest with you, comes a point where council actually has to do open records requests, which by the way, you can do legally, but the council should have access to everything, just like anything else. And yet, it has to go these extraordinary steps to obtain the truth. There was, example, there was numerous times when people who don't follow, we mentioned contracts, don't follow the Board of Customs Supplies, where their department heads independently, there was one department a little while ago in which that individual was negotiating a contract one-on-one without going to the bidding process. And then, by the good work of our internal auditor, we uncovered the fact that what they were doing was, of course, inappropriate, violating the state contract provisions, city contract provisions. And these kinds of things happen, and it happens at all different times in different ways. And my point is that, and to get the witnesses of the person to come forward, how do you compel them? So I think we need to visit that conversation. Also, I want to get into the 403. As you know, the council had to go through a pretty difficult situation with the former city clerk, in which there were allegations of a hostile work environment he created, inappropriate behavior, et cetera, in the office. And it became this conversation that the city clerk, in some sense, was above reproach, above the law. That you actually have to do and was not subject to the traditional human resource process, meaning like, you come in, investigation, you can be disciplined. And it became to a point where the only way you could even address, in theory, theory was that to address the serious situation happening in the office was the council had to do a full-blown 403 administrative hearing, bring charges, bring witnesses, and it was in the very end, by the way, was allegations of, like I said, hostile work environment, inappropriate behavior. And the idea, and luckily we did it, the person resigned, which we finally seemed to have woken up, and we had to do an investigative report, we had to hire a company, we had to do this whole process. And the very folks in the clerk's office was gonna have to go in a public body and have to relive their events that they did in a public forum in a council meeting.
So this
There's something wrong with having that. We had this very difficult situation going to the clerk's office. And yet, instead of dealing it, by the way, in how you deal with any other labor matters in the city, it was had to be a full-blown public conversation, which, by the way, I think is a problem. So I think, I'm not saying we're going to keep the 403, but there should be an option, meaning the council can do a 403, or that appointee can go through, the council can choose to go, that person goes through the traditional HR process. So this way, if someone has, and now I'll use an example, and this is, if, let's say this individual, an individual, in one of these offices is doing something extremely horrific, check that box off. Make your wildest, horrific event in your head. In order for the council to address this person, we have to do first we have to do hire a company, hire a investigator, investigate, interview, then get a council vote to do a process, then start setting up a public hearing process. And think about that versus something's going on, someone's saying something's going on, they can go to the traditional personnel matter, they go to the HR director, this is going on in the office, and they can do their proper investigation like they do with everything else. So there should be this option, and we just clear this up, and I looked through the law department, help us with clear that it should be either or. It shouldn't be you have to do this way. Because it created a dangerous problem, yes, Yvonne.
Yeah, I think, point out a really significant issue, Council President, and I think additionally to this section, looking at the section that is, officers of the city, which includes, various appointed positions as well as, personnel section, because I think, language in both of those sections could repair some of the issue that came up in this specific case, but probably happen in other cases, maybe not at this level, where there's a lack of clarity around how even individuals who are not part of the personnel system still have to abide
By the personal rules and policies.
Right.
And what was happening is, it was almost like they weren't allowed. I'll give you another example. There was an individual, a chairperson of, what was the committee? In which the administration had problems with the chairperson, said inappropriate things to a minority member of the mayor's staff. And the administration had us have to go begin the process of this 403 process in order for that chairperson to be, and it put enough pressure, the person finally stepped down, but we actually had to start going through this whole process of investigation, submitting the 403 requests, doing the bill of particulars, and doing the whole process. So there has to be a better way, because the fact that these people who were appointed felt that they were not subject to by the way, policies of, from, quality policies to, you name it, there's a problem. And that if we'd have to do extraordinary steps to get to remove a person who is violating ADA, whatever you want to put that on there, is a problem. So I would like to get that clarified, and if anything, if you can learn anything, this is the time to do it. It was a real problem. And I asked my commissioners, I know my council colleagues have lived through it, unfortunately, and the clerk's office lived through it. And it wasn't a good thing for anybody, but you learn from that and let's try to fix it. So, Commissioner Richard?
Mr. President, I agree. This try to put some due process in to protect this person. And I agree with the officers being boards and commissions as well. You could have a chairman or a board member that needs to go for whatever reason. But I see them as distinctively different in the sense that the clerk is elected by the council.
Right.
So I think the clerk should be unelected by the council. But maybe it should be in an executive session.
Well, the issue
Without
was,
this investigation
I'm with
and all
you.
this other stuff, and not, a tabloid kind of thing on the front page.
Exactly.
WPR or whatever.
I agree with you, but unfortunately, the way this 403 process says,
Well, that's what we're talking about.
right, it wasn't simply a matter the council just does an unelection. It was like we had to do this entire, rationale, why, here's the report. We had a 150-page report, witnesses being interviewed. We had to go through this entire process. My point was, there needs to be a better way.
Simplest system in executive session, 8 votes, and
Yes.
8 votes put you in, 8 votes takes you
Yeah.
out. And an executive session with a HR report or a
Whatever it
report
is.
from someone
Yeah.
in the council president's office or the council office. To simplify it for the clerk.
Right.
But as we
Or for the
spoke
city.
about, you can read it and see it and understand it
Right.
Right,
through the law department.
but this needs to be also not only for the clerk, who else is elected?
Exactly.
The treasurer,
Yeah.
what else is elected? Whoever's elected,
All,
by 8
all,
votes.
all the judges.
The judge.
I remember we had to go through, we had a judge for quite a few years ago, we had a judge issue. Was that appointed by the, I think,
Well,
they already
I think
appointed.
it's spelled out in section 403, who it applies to, right? So
No,
what
I
we're
know, but
talking about is
The idea is
really-
make it a bet, make it, there has to be a better way because,
Yeah,
you know,
but
what they were
what it
originally
applies
back
to
then
in
is different than now.
403, it can be another way that is a potential alternative process that's outside of 403. But anyone who is specifically referenced in 403 would be covered by a potential alternative process that you're talking about.
Commissioner
there.
Richard said, we simplify that process, which we probably should, because it needs to be easier and cleaner, because if you, listen, if you're elected, you're an elected, political appointee by whether it's the mayor or the council, right? I remember when there was a former mayor, way back when, had a problem with one of these judges, they were, I won't get into what the judge did, but the mayor had to go through extraordinary steps to get the judge to remove, and yet it was difficult. And that's there's a problem there, you know what I mean? I'm not saying, and I get it, we have to make sure there's due process, but if it's simply not, if you're elected, I agree. So I want to vet this issue. I think it's important. I think it's something that has to be addressed. I know it's not the sexiest of issue. It's not, most people don't really know the importance of it, but living through it twice this past 12 months, one by request by the administration and one council action, it was not a good process.
So,
So
Mr. President,
I asked that we look at that.
so members of both the commissions are subject to 403 or is it?
Yeah, no, it looks like yes, from what the law department, it said boards, commissions, appoint the mayor, except the staff of the mayor, of course.
Right.
And then, of course, we have to redefine what says gross misconduct, because it says here, for neglect of duty or gross misconduct. Well, someone comes in and is inappropriate, right? When you start looking up neglect of duty and gross misconduct, it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't fit for certain things that occur now in the workforce. Don't always neatly fit under those two very specific.
So how do you spell it out?
Well, what I'm saying is I think we need to, it can't be so narrowly defined because someone could come in and listen, produce something, on the inappropriate spectrum with another person, the same sex or the opposite sex, doesn't necessarily fall into that term. It becomes like this is one of the issues that we are finding out where could you plug that type of behavior or alleged behavior into that thing? And there was always a question, right? Because things have changed, policies, behavior, the expansion of definitions, right? They're greater than just these two things now. It's not just simply that the guy doesn't, that he or she doesn't come to work. It's how you do act at work. That person can be I'll give you an example of this. You can have a person who comes to work, does it great, is better than anybody else. But how they do it is part of, right? If they come in, let's say they swear at everybody all day long, but they get their job done, and they're swearing and cussing and saying expletives and wrong words and wrong language. But you say, but unbelievable, they get a job done, they're the best that they do. Well, I guess, now we're gonna kind of fit them into this misconduct, So I just wanna visit this. I think cleaning up, I think it's important that we do. I think it's something that we have a duty to do now since we found this problem, this exposed an issue like that. So
I have one more
I
question.
don't mean to pat on too much, but it was very detrimental and it was very harming to the process.
Department heads, Mr. President, serve at the pleasure of the mayor. Correct, am I correct? in that?
Yes, department
But
head.
yeah, it says here that, but the city council, so if we have a scenario where we have a department head, the mayor's happy with him.
The city
or
council.
her,
right,
or the
the
city council isn't, so the city council has a process that,
Right. So this is,
remove that.
so the
That's
city
the
council has a
problem.
right to remove, and I'm not okay with that. I get that, because that really, and I guess the bar's high, right? Because it says, by the way, here's another thing. The bar for removal, even from your own appointment, we just mentioned, you can elect this person, the council can elect this person with 8 votes. This says you need to have 2/3 to remove the person. That's a problem.
But if it's a mayoral appointee, maybe the 2/3
You keep the
is
2/3,
appropriate.
right,
But
and
if
I
it's
get
a
that.
councilmatic appointee, you know, 8 in, 8 out.
Exactly.
8 votes to get there, 8 votes to leave.
And I can understand why it should be an extraordinary step of 2/3, because you also want the balance. You don't want a legislative branch to go rogue and start inhibiting executive branch from being able to have good employees or do their job, and they feel that they could be, thrown out any time. And I agree with you, and that makes sense. Yeah, so I think we need to kind of redefine it, like, when there's a mayoral appointments, when there's a council appointment, and kind of clean this up. So I know so this is something that I think is important, that we should look at. I don't have the final answer to it. I have to see solicitors on the line. Oh, do I see solicitors?
Yes. Ms. Dyer.
So Sister Denham, do you see the section we're talking about?
In here.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. And I understand you'd like to, as I understand it, you'd like to redo the processes for removing council appointees or
And the
elected
mayor's-
people that are elected by the city council.
Right, and then also we separate how we handle mayoral appointees, and which is right.
Correct.
Makes sense. Right.
I'm
So
I'm
before-
taking notes.
Okay.
And I'm taking notes, and our office stands ready to assist in any way.
Commissioners, do you?
We can do research on due process and what criteria may be met, while at the same time providing you with the broadest discretion or authority.
Okay. And then I would also look at that. Okay, yeah, that's the big one, but I see two councilors I presume they want to make a statement on this particular section, I think, or other ones. So I'm gonna see what it is first. Commissioner, do you have any other question on this one right now?
No, wait till I hear from the law department, see what proposal comes forward.
Right, okay, so I have Councilman La Fortune. Are you gonna talk about this section right now, or do you have a comment? And do I let her speak? How do we do that? Okay, Councilman La Fortune?
Yes. So I just have, before I ask my question, I just have a clarifying question for you. Because I wasn't sure if I heard correctly. So are you saying that you want to remove the council appointee? Because we're using like appointee and elected interchangeably, because technically the clerk, in general, is not elected by the city residents. It's voted upon by by the majority of the council.
Yeah,
So
I'm sorry, you're right. You're correct. Hey, we're talking about an account, when I meant like, it's elected by the council, you're correct. So it'll be a council appointee to an elected council process. But we'll get that clarified. That's a valid point.
Oh.
We'll make sure.
Yeah,
You're
but
right.
my question before I ask my question, I just want to be clarify. So are you saying that what you would like to see it's for it to be changed so that the person is appointed by the council?
Oh, no, the person is already appointed by the council. It's, we're calling it appointed and elected by the council. We're using interchangeable. So you get appointed by the council to an affirmative vote of a simple majority of 8, the clerk's
So what is the
office.
change you're asking for? So I guess my question is, what is the change exactly you're asking for?
The change I'm asking for is that, a couple things. One, you get a simple 8 count to elect the person. It should be a simple 8 count to unelected the person, number one. Number two, there should be a better process than when this person who gets elected by the council of 8, it's a count by simple majority, that if the person does inappropriate things or something, that there has to be a better process where it's not such a huge public process where the council's doing a grand trial to go to a vote of unelecting the person. And especially when it's a personnel matter. So the question comes down to, do we have it that it'll be an option that the council can go to the grand trial process, or that person has to go to the traditional HR process? Because one of the issues that we were finding out in this process was, one of the arguments the person was putting forward was that they were above reproach. They were not subject to the HR processes or policies. They didn't have to follow that. They didn't have to go through those types of steps. So means then you have to do a grand, and I'm sure, and I don't want to speak for you, but I believe quite a few councilors, it wasn't a good experience for anybody, and especially for the people, in this case, in my mind, the victims in the matter. And it was, and having them have to go to a public process like that, and by the way, as you know, Councilman, we're gonna have to have a hearing, they're gonna be set up on, they have to go on testify, be sworn in, cross-examined in a public council meeting. I mean, it just seemed, there's something not right about that. Now, I just feel that, let's learn from that and try to make it better, and there's gotta be a better way. Because if the council, a simple majority elected you to the position, it should be a simple election to remove you. It should be an at-will position. The council should not have to go through the extraordinary steps of doing a full-blown investigation and trial to remove.
Yeah.
I'm just,
Council President.
I'm not saying you don't have to, but,
Yeah. So Council President, so this is my thoughts on this. So I think, just taking away, because I think this is a specific issue, and also because we did not go through a public hearing, we really don't know. It's very complicated. So I want to be careful even talking about it. But what I would say is that at the end of the day, because this is in a position that is appointed by council, by the majority of the council, it is a very political position. And so when you have any changes in the council leadership, I think one of my concern would be if there's any changes and someone wants to bring their own person in, then it becomes a bit of a complicated situation. So one thing that I would suggest is perhaps the clerk's position should be a position that's elected by the residents, similar to a city council person. And that way, it's, that person is doing the work for the people, but not necessarily feels obligated to council per se. And that just, perhaps that might take the political aspect away from it. But whether the person is appointed by the council or elected by the council, the reality is it's still something that the council and the majority of the council the person would be put in the position by the council or the majority of the council. And so how do you just take away from that? And I think if there's a process, if someone, doesn't abide to whatever standards are set out, that's outlined in HR employment guidelines, then it shouldn't change because you work for the mayor or you work for the city council. It should be standard across the board. And truth be told, it should be standard even for council people, right? So I just, I think we have to be careful and also making sure that whatever standards and policies that are implemented are equitable, but we also need to think about the position itself. It's a quite political position. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Councilwoman Anthony?
Thank you so much, Council President. I have to agree with some of what was said by my fellow councilwoman. I think there is, to make this clerk position at will really does lend itself to undue influence, I think. And I would be very reluctant to change the 2/3 of the members and also doing this behind closed doors. I think there's got to be a transparency, a public nature of this. And so I think there are things that don't work. I think that we certainly could have a little more detail in this provision about exactly what should happen. I mean, you're right, having lived through it, there's obviously some things that could be fleshed out in terms of how the public hearing should happen and the whole 9 yards. But I'd be very, very careful, I think, about changing too much of this because I think it does make that clerk's position, if we're talking about that particular position, that a very political appointment.
Well, I may say, we're not talking about the clerk, we're just talking about positions in general. The issue was that, and I understand it's in the public process, but I mean, the nature of the allegations were pretty difficult. And I guess the question comes down to, does it create a chilling effect that people will not want to come forward if an appointed person is acting inappropriate in some form or fashion? And the people would feel, that was the concern, there was a chilling effect occurring. Took a lot of courage took a lot of courage for those women to come forward, bottom line. Took a lot of courage for them to come forward and to tell their story and to be exposed publicly. And so there has to be a better way. And so I understand you guys are concerned about, I don't know, the politics. I'm worried about the human condition and the chilling effect and how our other employees are treated. And if they're treated inappropriately, that it would take such courage to come forward to talk about their concerns. So there has to be a better way, whether it's that they go to HR or something, but there's got to be a better way. So that's kind of where I'm coming. So I'm not picking on the clerk. We just use it as an example because unfortunately it's demonstrative evidence. All these positions, you're kind of, that's my concern, whether you're, elected appointee. We're going to use appointee by the mayor of the council. They should all have to conform to the appropriate rules of behavior. That's my concern, and it shouldn't have to be such an extreme measures to have them addressed. And that's my biggest concern. I don't have the answer. We're just spitballing here, but so I'm gonna look, to the law department, give us some suggestions, and of course, we'll continue to weigh in on this. Law department, Lisa, did you have a question? You said, I think, you want to weigh in?
No, I just wanted to comment that in doing so, we need to be mindful of the Open Meetings Act. Because anyone who's subject to disciplinary measure can insist that their hearing be held in public. So I'm just throwing that in for what it's worth during the time that you are all thinking about it and during the time that we're going to be providing you with assistance and coming up with a system. It may be that you may choose to add to the code of ethics instead of putting it in the charter. Certain standards of conduct in the code of ethics is a possibility.
I
think everybody learned from experience during this past administration, including the solicitor's office, which had its own roles to play in these convoluted situations. And I do think it's worth reviewing. And I just wanted to point out that we are going to have to keep in mind state laws that will govern these hearings.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Well, exactly, Madam Solicitor, is why I suggested the executive session, because of the open meetings on the person, the nature of a personnel hearing. As far as the politics goes, the city clerk is pretty much a ministerial position.
Yeah.
However, I'm more concerned about when you were getting involved with the judiciary and other officials that are covered here than the city clerk itself.
Councilman Fortune, do you have any further? Your hand still up?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment,
Sure.
sorry, thank you. But I just wanted to add, I agree in terms of that the city clerk is technically an administrative position. And I also agree with the solicitor around the code of, the code of ethics. I think this, when it comes to those types of standards, there should be a process, a human resource, an ethics, or a process that is the same across the board to ensure that people understand what are acceptable and non-acceptable behaviors, and that we create, inclusive and equitable spaces. But again, if it is going to be an administrative position where, one is focused on the work and serving the city of Providence, I am concerned if we're going to, like my council colleague, Helen Anthony stated, I am concerned of making any decisions behind closed doors and not engaging with the public about it.
Councilman Anthony, did you have a further comment?
Yes, thank you so much, Council President. I guess one last thing I'd like to say is the personnel policy has to be thoroughly looked at too, because it's not at all clear what maybe if I'd spent time or knew where to look or something like that, but it seemed to me that also failed in this particular situation. So that may add some protections also earlier in the process before it gets to council.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fair. Thank you. Commissioner, any other?
Nothing.
So, the issue for me is that I think we definitely have to visit that and see if there's some more better ways to do it.
And I think,
Commissioner, Rodriguez?
city solicitor can help resolve. Putting things into the and so forth, and not touch, child. So we need to get some information. Solicitor. Forward and. Definitely need clarity. Before we start making changes. And city solicitor lay it out for us.
City Solicitor, you have your charge. Thank you. It's, I mean, that's one of the issues. That was my big issue on that one, because it clearly is a problem, I think. Yeah. So I want to go to the next, any other comments on it? Want to go to the next section, I guess it was courts, which is Article 5, is Judge Caprio is present.
He is unable to attend, would like to reschedule, but he does have some recommendations.
Okay, so we do have recommendations from this report, right? If you can forward them, and how about, I guess, is that the same with the probate court too?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were right. Sorry, municipal court could not attend because they have court tonight. They would like to be rescheduled, but they do not have any proposed recommendations to change.
Okay.
Probate does have recommendations. and
Probate court does have recommendations.
Yes, and while we're on courts, I did make copies in case when you discuss the courts again, whether you wanted the housing court also included in the charter. This is the section from the ordinance.
Okay,
So I didn't know if it's something you want to look into.
okay, so I would think at the same, when we take them all at the same time, we probably can, okay?
Okay.
And then have the city solicitor look at the merits of doing that. I would ask that in the court, I don't know if it is, but I don't know if it's in these titles, but that we should make sure that the positions, especially when it's a FOIA, that it's concurrent with, I guess, the term of that council. One of the things I've seen is where there's rollover, where you have appointments. And what happens is, just because it's the same mayor or the same council, those positions should automatically roll over. Those council members, new council, whether it's the same people or not, should have the opportunity to vet and bring those people forward and decide whether to vote yes or no, and have those people continue in that position. And I'll give you an example. You got one of the issues is the Commissioner of Public Safety, where Commissioner of Public Safety, in my estimation, his term expired at the end of the 4 years, but there's been a legal interpretation, which is very liberal, which says that, he just rolls over, which means future mayors, actually future councils. Remember now, the commissioner is submitted by the mayor and voted by the council. And the commissioner of public safety is supposed to be a creature of both branches of government. So, for example, this council, this present council, the council before, was denied the opportunity to vet the commissioner of public safety and have the ability to vote, especially positions where the council has to vote on. The fact that the council was denied both times to vote, and there was no way to redress it. Once they're gonna go back to redressing it, and it's a charter issue. The charter doesn't say it continues on, so that position should have been resubmitted. The next term, if the next mayor still wants this
So
individual.
what did the city solicitor have to say regarding that?
At the
So
time,
what I'm saying to you is
the
that.
city
you have
solicitor,
city-
the city solicitor had a more liberal construction of it, but then the council couldn't do anything about it because we can't hire anybody to defend our position on our interpretation.
The charter doesn't say, correct me if I'm wrong, that any of these positions have to be resubmitted.
No, some of them do. Some of the
But
fines.
if it's silent on the.
I think it's silent. I don't have it in front of me, right? So the question is, and since it's an appointment by the mayor and voted by the council, shouldn't the new council have the opportunity to decide whether or not that commissioner should be the commissioner of public safety? Remember now, he gets nominated, he or she gets nominated by the mayor and voted on by the council. So I think that's something we should look into, because it should be, future council should have the opportunity to vet whoever's going to be the, I'm using the commission, any other position that is silent, because they're not, so I don't know if it's by design or not, but there's a problem with that. Because it's not fair, by the way, because the point is the commission is supposed to be preaching both branches. I'm going through my experience, so this is something I would like to see addressed. Lisa, Solicitor Thurman?
Yes. What I wanted to say is that I believe the office did a legal interpretation based on the rules of statutory interpretation, and this is the perfect opportunity for the council to propose rewording if the majority of the council chooses to put that on the ballot. This is exactly how you change language that is, not coming out the way you want it to, and what your intent is of the current council as opposed to back 10 years ago in 2012.
Now, I won't be here next term. Councilman Vargas probably will be, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? If things go the same way, he won't have an opportunity to vote who the commissioners. So here's someone, a commissioner of public safety who is intricate to, by the way, to public safety in general, would never get vetted. A new council members coming next term don't even know who the person is. So I think, this is my thing, as a council person, I think more, checks and balances is good. It gives the opportunity for the public to revisit such a high profile position where the public now, when the council vets it, the public has an opportunity to come in and vet their concerns about how that person's been doing. So it's not just simply an automatic appointment by the mayor, it's an appointment and you vote by the council. So my point is, the only reason why I think we abstain is because the council doesn't vote. And what happens is council's been denied past 2 terms that oversight and vetting process.
Well, yes and no, because initially they did approve it and this person says it's the pleasure of the mayor.
Yeah, but that's three different councils ago.
Right, I know.
Yeah, so 3 different council groups
I understand.
ago, right, and is now because what 3 councils ago did, or thought it was okay, future councils now are stuck with that decision, when I look at it, they shouldn't. I think it's fair to the body.
Did the fire chiefs come in and police chiefs come in? every
No,
4
fire
years?
chiefs and police are hired directly by the Commissioner of Public Safety.
But they're department heads.
I know, but the commissioners gets submitted by the mayor and voted by the council,
Right.
and it says in the commissioner's duties, he or she hires the chief police.
So
and fire.
similar to the tax assessment, tax collector,
Right. Who gets hired by,
the finance.
but the finance director gets submitted to the mayor.
Right,
and voted by the council.
Right, no, so it's similar to that.
Same idea.
Did
So,
the finance director come in every 4 years?
yeah, they get submitted. So I'm just saying, so there's there's an equity. It's not fair, but listen to me, at the end of the day, I lost my right the last 2 terms. But my thing is, I want to try to protect future rights of the council and the public, because they should have a right to know who's going to be their commissioner of public safety. And also be able to, for example, we haven't had a fire chief in 8 years, 6 years, 7 years. It's a perfect example. That should also be cleared up too, because there's a problem with that. The fact that you remember, the mayor can submit anybody to be commissioner of public safety. You don't have to be police, fire, you can be someone who's a farmer the whole life, doesn't know anything about public safety, gets 8 votes, you're there. So right now, you could have the commissioner be also a fire chief who has no experience being in fires.
Well, the past commissioners have been part-time attorneys. We go back in history, and the mayor himself.
Because if you
Other
remember,
than Partington and
and it
Harriet.
makes sense, because the commission, think about is the civilian oversight of your paramilitary operations, right? The whole purpose is, the reason why you have the president of the United States as what? President of the States, commander of armed forces, because it's civilian oversight over the military. I know, but police and fire, in particular, police, is a paramilitary operation. And that's why the structure was, we're gonna put a commissioner, which is civilian, whether they have the background or not, who is the civilian oversight of our paramilitary operations. That was the whole purpose. And that's my interpretation.
That's
I'm just trying to
that's
make
permissible. I don't know if it's the best model.
I didn't say this.
I know you
I
did.
didn't say it's the best.
I think Partington and Parry have been, coming with unbelievable resumes
Definitely.
and brought a lot to the
Oh,
city.
you're correct.
Versus the part-time lawyers who I knew each one personally without mentioning their names going back to the
But-
70s when I was a kid.
But both of those
And
individuals,
those guys
even
were
on the
more like
Partington,
political patronage than,
but even on the
actually doing the
Partington,
job.
Partington was submitted every 4 years.
Hmm.
So Partington was submitted every 4 years because of the respect of the branches of government. So that's a perfect example. It didn't happen until recently where the lack of respect for that process actually. So it's not about, I can't personalize it. You could have John Smith. or
no, we
whoever's
can't
there.
personalize. I agree.
The issue is
We're talking
this.
about the civilian versus the.
The issue is that every 4 years you have a new mayor, well, it's the same person elected, a new council, new body. It's not, it's still in theory, a new body, a new mayor, right? You get it? You're like, maybe the same person. So when those positions come around, the public has a right to know who is, and that council, that body shall have a right, under the charter, to vote up or down if that person should stay, keep at that job. That's how I look at it. To me, it's all about checks and balances. And I understand, you're absolutely right. You started off saying this is very mayoral centric. That's good, but it's also bad. I mean, unfortunately, we've had our ups and downs in all different ways of all sorts of creeds, et cetera. But the reality is a strong, both co-equal branches of government creates a better democracy. Right, I think. Creates
Well,
compromise.
Well, there's always that tension between the branches of government, whether it's the city of Providence, the United States government, the state government, or the natural tension.
Mr. Munn?
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to note also in this article, under section 411, public hearings, the issue that Councilman Harris brought up last meeting regarding board boundaries and public hearing notice. This is
Oh,
the
yes.
section that talks about where a public notice has to be published, and I know that that is also dictated under state statute, I believe, but we had said that we were going to look into that.
But we have to expand it,
Yeah.
because it just says newspaper circulate, so it should say, should be an expansion now because of modern technology, right?
Right, and also making sure that we're inclusive of, other
Yeah.
smaller publications that reach.
I agree, so that's something that should be expanded.
Going back to the probate file, I know they're gonna come in on another day. Was there a reason for a 6-year term to overlap mayoral, so?
I don't know, I presume it was because of, maybe it was,
Because if we think about that court, Mr. President, it's really a state court at the local level. It's really not a city function, so. It's still very.
Right.
Would you agree?
yeah.
Are you thinking that should be changed to run concurrent with the council as well, that particular term?
So there's something to be said about that, because there's something kind of, like, why did that happen?
Right, that's what I.
Yeah, clearly, it seems to be one of those kind of things, it was like a one-off for some reason. So
It could have happened to protect somebody, it could have happened
Right.
just because they wanted it outside of the political process that changes every 4 years. They didn't want it subject to,
well,
there's the new mayor, the new council, the new
right.
department heads, if you will, and then the subject with the commissioner we just had.
Well, I mean, that's something that we can visit. We should try to find out why there was only 6 years to begin with. Maybe there's some rationale.
Maybe, I don't want to suggest where, but
No,
what are the terms of the other 6 towns?
Sasha's a couple of things that I run across. And the problem is that there's only so much, because we all know that you can do as much as you can, but the reality is that whatever the council then distills and what the public will decide is, if you do too much, you just can't really.
I don't think you can do too much.
I know, but I'd like to definitely try to achieve, like I mentioned, there's certain things, I mentioned, like this 403 in my mind needs to be addressed, that's an issue. I don't want to leave that to the future council.
Right, and I think
Whatever the answer, whatever's a better way, fine, but this has to be a better way.
I could be wrong, but if you present on election day a ballot
Too much.
with too much stuff, 10, 20, 30, I don't know how many things it'll be, how many provisions of it. You'll lose the vote, and they may not
Exactly.
want even about this, because at that point, there'll probably be state bond referendums, there could be another type of a city bond referendum, plus
You're right.
the full ballot of the general election. So I think we need to pick our most important ones for recommendation
I
to the
agree.
council.
And our recommendations go to the council.
Yeah,
When you finalize.
Yeah, but you guys do what you want, you know,
Do what you
the
want.
elected officials with best.
So I don't think we need to
or
go crazy going over all of these things. It's gonna be too much.
fair enough. I just want to bring those particular ones to mind.
And I know things that you brought up, you get clarification from the city solicitor's office. And take a really good look, dive into changes that need to be made. They need to be made and make quality decisions.
Saban, do you have anything else to add? So do you have anything else?
Yes, you also have some recommendations before you. There's two from Majority Leader Taylor, but we continue the mayor's one is attached to your agenda. And then we also have.
Where is it?
Oh,
And also the Commissioner Vargas.
Oh, okay.
Speaking to us before.
Oh, yeah, so are we, oh, yeah, these in the, this is section 302.
You want to wait for that till we do the mayor vote, so.
Oh, yeah, I guess we could. We'll wait for that. But meanwhile, why don't we start making sure we'll be able to, well, be able to present it, put on the screen so the public has access to it, right? Okay? Let's do that, so instead of me reading it. So what I'll do is if you can hold off, have it for the next one, I'll submit it. What I'll do is I'll submit it as an exhibit, the next one, but make sure we'll be able to put it on the screen, okay? Okay. It's right here, these two right here. You know, what we'll do is at the next, I'm gonna wait, because I wanna be able to put on the screen, because we're in a funny place here, because we're zooming, and then we're entering exhibits, but the public can't see them, and so I just rather wait for the next meeting, so you have the ability to adopt them as exhibits, and then put on the screen.
I can say.
Well, let's just go, I'd like to have it here, it'd be nice if he's here next week. Huh?
Okay,
All right, so long as we do that for next meeting, okay?
and also regarding the next meeting, this school break and finance director will not be able to attend, she will be out of state. That's the only sections we have on. So we didn't know if you want, what you want to do for the next meeting, if you wanted to change.
Well, if we can rework whoever, let's do it.
Well, yeah, we can try, maybe we can try to get the.
So I leave it to the discussion, rework, so you can come for next week, okay? All right. All right. Commissioners, have any-
Thank you.
Commission, huh? Anything
I'm all
else?
set, thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you, everybody, for attending this evening. We're gonna keep rolling. Do we have, what's our schedule for a public hearing?
Well, the community sessions are happening in March.
Okay.
Throughout
So I
March,
just,
and
and
then
are they posted on the website, et
They're
cetera?
not posted yet, we're confirming the details.
I would ask that once you get the dates and times, can we post it and then send it to all the, send to the rec centers, the community
Yeah.
centers, and get it out there to all different organizations and let them know?
Yep.
You know,
absolutely.
and I'd also like to see, we talked about advertising, well, just because the charter is one thing, I like to take the liberty and we should start, you know, go to all the different newspapers, you know, the Latino papers, everything. All the little local, little papers you see, all the little stores and stuff. Markets, I would like to reach out and make sure we can get some,
Beautiful.
and it's in different languages and stuff, okay?
Great.
All right,
Thank you.
all right, does that make sense? So, thank you all, and so then nothing, no other further business, then I'll do a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion adjourned by Commissioner.
Second.
Second, by Commissioner Councilman Vargas.
Thank you.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you all, good job. Oh, do I text you?
Thank you all. Good night.
I'll take care of that.
I'm gonna still be live. I don't want you to trust me. I'll give you a social security number.